And I want to start with Mr. Ntephe. I think so Mr. Ntephe, as an investor and one that's looking at different countries in the continent, what do you see in terms of your interest for investment, but the key things you'd love to see in Uganda that would enable you to invest in Uganda's energy sector or mineral sector? Thank you.
Okay. I work for a company called ERHC Energy, and our claim to fame in East Africa is that we were one of those who've drilled for oil in Kenya. I personally drove that move and convinced my board after Tullow discovered oil in Turkana in Kenya. We bid for and won Block 11A in Turkana in 2012. And by 2016, we had done our studies and we drilled the Tarakwon well in northwest Kenya, in Turkana. That came in at about north of $33 million. We discovered a working hydrocarbon system, but we didn't make commercial discoveries, and studies on that are continuing. So we're certified investors, if you will, foreign investors in East Africa. To your question, what would we like to see from the minister, from Uganda? Well, we would like to see progress along the path that she's mentioned. It's very enlightening, it's very encouraging, all the work that is being done from Uganda and the rest of East Africa. I'll say this, the approval process in Kenya 10, 15 years ago when we went there was smoother than in many parts of Africa we'd been, and that was very impressive for us. It was very impressive. But I'll say to Madam Minister, we still need to do more. The private investor wants more from East Africa. I say that because as an African, don't worry about the passports I carry. As an African born in Africa, but now living in the West, I think that we need, a tsunami of foreign investment, global investment into Africa. So I noted in particular where you mentioned it takes 6 months. Please, Madam Minister, we need it to take 30 days maximum. We need it to take 30 days. 6 months is still too much. It's quick, but it's still too much. I think that's one of the things that we need to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ntephe. I know that the minister will be interested in having a discussion with you in terms of the opportunities that are in Uganda. We'll come back to you, but I'd like now to invite Mr. Keith Stokes-Smith. And your organization, you connect businesses and you emphasize on relationships between businesses. In terms of what you're doing, what would you like to see from the Ugandan government or the Ugandan businesses that would be important to enable you link them with businesses in the UK and other parts of Europe that can help to foster foreign direct investment into the markets? Thank you.
I'm not sure how to get this working. Either of them. Thank you. First of all, can I mention that I'm very aware that Africa as a whole is not in the top 20 continents, in this case, for UK investment, which obviously is desperately sad. But I was very pleased to hear earlier that Rwanda, it's the second largest investor in Uganda. So that slightly changes the situation there. I'm not quite sure why UK investors do not wish to invest in Africa or even East Africa. I suspect there's some reluctance to invest in oil and gas because it's very volatile in its pricing, and of course we're moving towards a carbon-free world, and therefore green energy, yes, solar energy could be attractive, and hydro energy could be attractive, and therefore that would be something I would like to see the UK investing more in, and I'm sure that would be something they'd like to do. My brief was actually some other thoughts as to what the UK government or we could do to encourage investment, and actually identified 8 areas here. Firstly, why not create a joint Africa-UK Trade Commission to streamline trade policies, address market access issues, and foster a more collaborative environment between the UK and East Africa. Also, more support from the UK for the Continental Free Trade Agreement, support projects that enhance connectivity and reduce logistical bottlenecks, and I think that's also an issue for UK investors, the logistics and infrastructure aspects of moving goods around. I think, if anything, we're more into providing services to East Africa than we are to goods. And certainly, as I said earlier, the UK, on balance, benefits from trade anyway more than East Africa does. I think, yes, promoting green energy, which I mentioned earlier, and sustainable development, encourage more businesses to invest in East Africa. But then again, I go back to the point I made originally. Clearly, they do not want to, possibly because the sort of things we encourage them to invest in are an oil and gas. Certainly, yes, minerals, etc., is a good thing. But I think for too long, we've had it easy here. The obvious markets are Europe and other countries, and obviously, from my point of view, Commonwealth countries, where there is a bit more support for the 4 Commonwealth countries in East Africa. But I think we're just too lazy. I think we go for the low-hanging fruits, and therefore happy to invest with a reasonable return on things without risk. I think we're too risk-averse, and I think we've got to change our culture, because I know Africa has massive opportunities, and I think it's a change of culture.
Thank you very much. I think some members of the audience will want to pick up on that shortly. But if I could go quickly to Dr. Rashid, you have been involved in a major cogeneration investment. Uganda is right now grappling with the issue of cogeneration or waste to energy and such large kinds of investment. In terms of the lessons learned, what should Uganda pick up in terms of the lessons that you've learned in developing this? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Eric. So just to say, we've had lots of visits from politicians and leaders from Uganda and Kenya to our facility, which is the Centre for Engineering and Manufacturing Excellence. I often tell people it's in the Far East, and they look at me and said, how long does it take you to get to work? I said, no, the Far East of London. It still takes me a long time to get to work there. But we are in an area of high deprivation, but we are part of what we call the Thames Estuary in London, and we focus on a number of things to help make or regenerate communities. First of all, we are actually helped by non-governmental and governmental organisations, and Local London and Grow London, and a colleague of mine from there, Prue Ashby, is here. So we're supported by inter-agencies that work together. That's a very important lesson, to not knock each other over, but support each other's objectives. That's the first one. The second one is we focus on skills development with young children for the future, because investing in any type of industry or sector without having a population that can take on jobs is almost hiding to nothing. So on our economic regeneration program, we not only support new and emerging businesses, but we work with local communities and school children who are as young as 9 to encourage them into the education system. As it happens, the area that I work in Barking and Dagenham and in Havering, we have a significant East African community, and we are specifically focused on establishing green technology incubators for those communities that have been overlooked before. So the key lessons are work interagency, long-term plan, focus on skills development. And since this section's about energy, I should tell you that at CME, we are entirely focused on hydrogen as a new form of energy. There are 7 key areas in the UK that are developing centres of excellence around energy, hydrogen, and we're one of those areas. It is a format that is focused on net zero, lower carbon emissions, so that should be part of the mixed economy of energy provision. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll quickly then go to Dr. Paramita. And you have supported African countries to do PPPs or done PPPs in different regions of the world. And PPPs are considered one of the important ways of bringing in investment, and especially in the energy sector that the Honourable Minister heads. What lessons would you like to share with us? And also, how do you look at that in terms of raising investment for renewable energy products? Thank you.
Thank you. And so first, congratulations to the Minister for those excellent remarks, very encouraging. Just a minute on the context is that, the World Bank Group's mandate or mission is to reduce poverty, and the only sustained pathway out of poverty is jobs. And to be able to create jobs, especially in the real sector, critical is the quality of infrastructure amongst many other factors in a country. And so this session is particularly important, and I think earlier this year, the World Bank and the African Development Bank came together for a compact that, Africa still has 50% of its population without access to energy. And I think connecting at least 300 million to the grid, to quality, reliable energy is a priority. So again, this session is really important. And then all the energy of the future is going to be from cleaner sources of energy. So it's more on renewable energy. And I think we've been seeing a significant upward trend of renewable energy projects, especially in Eastern Africa and across all sources. So solar, wind, geothermal, bioenergy, various sources. But the amount of bankable projects is still very low. And whether it's pure private investments or PPPs in renewable energy in particular, these are not easy. These are long gestation projects. And I think, as was mentioned by one of the investors, given the time that it takes to design, develop, and get these operational, there are 4 lessons that we've seen cutting across emerging markets, not only in East Africa, but across emerging markets, that we think is important for us to share. One is, I think, very strong political commitment and the leadership at the top truly wanting genuine private sector participation, because most countries are currently fiscally constrained and there's limited public resources available for infrastructure development. So inviting responsible private sector to participate in infrastructure service provision is very important, but it's a big mindset shift to move from a status quo of public sector delivery of infrastructure to inviting the private sector. So I think what we heard from the Minister, strong political leadership and commitment from the top, is absolutely fundamental, and it needs to be sustained over a period of time. The second thing that we've seen is basically transparency. Again, we spoke about it in a previous section. Institutional capabilities and transparency of processes is absolutely important. It can't be regular changes in the authorizing environment, because that again puts investors in a place of discomfort. The third one is technical capabilities, not only because the private sector is going to come in with a pretty good, strong legal, financial, technical team, and it's important that the government also is equally technically capable of dealing and contesting and dialoguing with the private sector, so building these capabilities. And fourth, I think irrespective of which sector it is in infrastructure, stakeholder management, active communication with all of the stakeholders, both businesses, households, various other stakeholders in the community, of trying to explain why you're bringing in the private sector, which sectors, what kind of expected benefits do you see. That kind of stakeholder engagement from the very outset in a transparent manner is very important for success. And we've seen a few transactions in East Africa. We not only work on the legal regulatory issues, we also work on capacity building. We help in developing bankable projects. We also serve as a transaction advisor. We also invest in PPPs. There are different units in the World Bank Group that serve all of these functions. And we've been able to close some in the renewable energy, especially in hydro and solar in the region. We're exploring a number of other new renewable energy projects in Africa more broadly, and we stand committed to support this, but there's lots of issues around regulation, tariff regulations, the regulatory reform and the unbundling, willingness to invite private participation in the transmission sector in particular. The minister referred to mini grids, off grids, rooftop solars. These are all projects that we have supported in different jurisdictions, but they all require a lot of clarity in the rules of how the contract will be designed and how will it be overseen. So there are examples. The first thing we do with governments around the world is, before we get started, just share lessons of what others have done, what has worked, what has not worked, because not all models are successful, and I think we're all learning in the process. There's a lot of knowledge out there that we'll be happy to share, and again, it's an honor to be part of this session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When I come to Dr. Ramadan, in the energy sector, you have to raise lots of financing to support the oil and gas sector. There is the upstream work, there is the refinery, there is the crude oil pipeline, there is transmission of electricity, there is the generation plants that should be coming up shortly. So you have a constrained envelope. We just want to hear from you, what are your plans to address this, and how do you see yourself being able to raise the capacity of government to deliver on these projects? Thank you.
Thank you. The plan is simple, is to raise money. And I'm here to raise money. First, we have our traditional partners we are working with. They could be not interested in certain areas, but definitely it's a value chain. They support those areas where they are comfortable. I'm talking of the World Bank, I'm talking of with its sister IFC, we are working closely together, especially in building infrastructure and also supporting the private sector that is partaking in this. But also, we are now working very aggressively on public-private partnerships. Our frameworks are ready. They have been tested. We have seen where there are challenges in delaying processing of projects by especially the private sector, and we are addressing them. But we are also coming at a time when the green financing aspect is in-house, and we've been able to work on the fiscal frameworks. In my ministry now, we have a climate financing unit, full-fledged, and we are working closely with our multilateral partners to fine-tune it and mobilize financing from that angle as well. But the big money comes from the private sector, because that's where the money is, and I'm here really to interest the audience here in the opportunities my minister has been talking about. And I think he made a point of risk aversion. There's a lot of risk aversion in the West. There are so many opportunities, and Africa now is the land of these opportunities, if you look around very closely. And there are those people who are taking advantage of these opportunities. They are mainly coming from other places. I don't see them here. From the East, from the Middle East, and they are coming and we are doing business with them. I would really want to say, if you want to make money in the next 2 decades, get to the plane, come to Africa, we process for you these opportunities. If you wait on, these opportunities will not wait. They are going to certain categories of people. This is the message I want to be clear in the room. I see a lot of, caution and carefulness and so many questions. There are people who don't ask those questions, and they are getting these opportunities. I want to tell you the truth. And we are closing a lot of big deals in Africa, particularly now in Uganda, with some particular kinds of people. When I talk like this, I'm sure everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about. And I would want our traditional partners in development, the United Kingdom, to take full advantage of the opportunities before us. And we work together to develop these ATMs to bridge the infrastructure gap in Africa. Talk about the infrastructure gap, for example. In the past 2 decades, who has played the biggest role? Where has this money come from that has built the infrastructure in Africa? Because we have closed it, I think, in the last 2 decades, much faster than in the previous century. And we have now electricity, we have highways connecting all corners of the country, we have the railway lines which are being revamped, we have the IT, national backbones, fiber laid across the continent, and younger people connecting themselves in the gig economy and so on. This money has come from different places, and I would want to encourage the investors in this part of the world to really pick a leaf from this, and we move together.
Thank you so much. Before we come to the audience, I'd just like the Minister to have a rejoinder. I think some of what you've said has tickled her, and she'd just like to say a few words before we ask for questions. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, there was concern about the time that we take to issue a license. 6 months is too long. But I wanted the audience to appreciate the factors, the key factors that sometimes make us delay, especially if you are to invest in mineral and oil. The issue of access to land. There's no way I can give you a mining license when you have not access to the land. We have 4 land tenure systems in Uganda, whereby one tenure system places ownership of land into the hands of the people to own land in perpetuity. You get your land title, that is your land. And most people have inherited this land. One of them, land can belong to government. Where land belongs to government, access to that becomes easier. In Tanzania, land belongs to government. So when it came to the East African crude oil pipeline development, Tanzania moved very fast, while Uganda was negotiating with the people who own land. And the moment you get one challenge from one project-affected person, then the world zeroes on you. Civil society organization, you have to clear World Bank projects. You have to make sure that you have compensated people. So because of that, you take a long time to issue such licenses. But where you don't require access first, like a prospecting license. To just organize your papers, and tomorrow I issue a prospecting license. You know? Exploration license. I have to introduce you to the local governments. Once I do that, you begin digging and carrying out samples. I give you the export license. So I wanted you to appreciate our land tenure system. That sometimes we get problems, challenges with project-affected people where somebody says, over my dead body, I'm not moving away. And you have to negotiate. This is my ancestral land. This is where my great-grandfathers were buried. I'm not moving away. And where you say you compulsorily acquire, because our constitution gives government mandate to compulsorily acquire, but you have to be prompt in paying and adequate. So what does adequate means? So that can take you to court. I wanted to make this explanation so that you come down knowing that you have to be a little bit patient with us. One president had banned this kind of tenure system, Idi Amin. Idi Amin said, oh, you know, no Miro land, no what. But that caused him problems. So when President Museveni took power, he placed land back into the hands of the communities and individuals, and people were happy. So we are managing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I think that was very clear. And I see we have experts in land here and the authorities responsible as well. I think they'll address any further questions that you have. Now, in the next 5 minutes, as we come towards the end of this session, I'd like to ask the audience to ask any questions you may have. And I think we start from Her Excellency, the High Commissioner. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody, for your comments. And my question is for Ms. Dasgupta from IFC. Just wanted to know now, in terms of the bank perspective, how long are you now looking at projecting and giving financing to private sector through the IFC for these for the smaller private companies to do a PPP, especially from within the region, which includes local content as part of the guarantees? Thank you. Well, we get a lot of inquiries here in the mission, so that's why I'm asking you. Thank you.
So the tenor for the projects for the IFC, private sector, it starts at 7-8 years and goes even longer, depending on the tenor of the project. You know, if it's PPP in power, it often goes even longer. Some of the smaller PPPs like rooftop solar, etc., it could be a little smaller, but you know, the tenor of the project is not fixed. It all depends on the sector.
The time it takes for you to agree to the financing.
Okay. Again, depends on, yes, so you know, we are not the swiftest organization, because we also don't crowd out the private sector, the investment banks that can do it faster, because we are, at the end of the day, an organization that works with our shareholders, which is the governments around the world. And so we have made agility quite an important part of our process. So there are record deals in 90, 100 days. And there are some, like the complicated projects in infrastructure, you know, do take a lot of due diligence, right? There's a lot of environmental, social safeguards that we need to be mindful of. I think the minister very eloquently articulated some of these issues around displacement, around land rights, and there are lots of sensitive issues that need to be mindful of. In the context of infrastructure, it does take a while.
Thank you so much. Please, next question.
Interesting discussions we're having this afternoon. One of the points that was made this afternoon was take the flight and come to Uganda. My question is, there are no direct flights from I would like to take a direct flight. When is that happening?
Thank you. I think we have someone from Uganda Airlines who is here. Who said that?
I think Jennifer is here, is going to have a session, and she's going to tell you the good news, because we are about to get to a direct flight to Kampala.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Just the last two questions, and then we shall be done. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Perez Ochieng, and I've been in this convention from the beginning. So 14 years down the line, we are still here. And the comment and the question I want to ask is in relation to the progress we've made over the 14 years. And I'm very sure, Your Excellency, you've been in a lot of these sessions as well. As part of the diaspora, part of our remit as people who are still connected to our land is that we are able to introduce new ideas and new technologies to the Africa from where we have learned in Europe. I'm sitting here in this session today because part of some of the colleagues I brought to speak about today is about energy. And I thought this session is so important because everything we produce is energy related. If you look at the trends in UK now, when it comes to importing your goods, because this is a big session again in the afternoon, looking at opening up markets for Uganda goods or Kenya goods for that matter. We have been called as a company so many times to do a market access initiative for particular products or more products, the embassy is here. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, your wishes and desires are not really connected to the markets. So when we are talking about importing new goods, the trends now in Europe now are looking at sustainability. They are looking at the use of alternative green energy. And when I sit and I'm thinking, yes, we're investing more in the oil and gas, but how does this relate to the new opportunities in green energy? And how does this make your products more appealing to the UK and European community? And is this something of concern? And if it is, in here today we are sitting with experts that have previously invited you to come and see the hydrogen innovation in its start and how it is progressing, and whether some of these green skills and technologies we are talking about are sitting here right before you today and the opportunities to take at this summit, and whether these are part of what we can begin to say are ticking the boxes of which summit has been all about for the last 14 years. And for mine, it's just appeal and kind of bring a light to where I think there's opportunities to do something in opening up access to markets with understanding of all the trends that are happening now in Europe for green products.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the Minister is an expert in that question.
Thank you so much.
She's a minister's friend.
This is just for your information. Uganda's energy mix is comprised of green energy. 94% of our energy is green. That's why I always talk about our own just transition, because we are at a different level. We are investing in oil and gas to get money to work on the energy infrastructure. If you can give me the money I want to expand my transmission and distribution infrastructure, I may abandon developing oil and gas. And money for oil and gas is ring-fenced for infrastructure. But we also need fertilizers for production and productivity. We must feed the world. We are targeting fertilizers from oil and gas. The pharmaceuticals will need oil and gas. So for green energy, please, Uganda's energy mix is 94% green. From hydropower to solar. We are now developing geothermal. We have 24,000 megawatt capacity from nuclear, and we shall develop it for energy purposes, not for other purposes. Nuclear energy for energy purposes. So please take heart. Uganda is green. Our energy is green. Our energy is green, Madam.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. And I think